Great. All right. Thank you all for joining. I mean, some people are still rolling in, but we're happy to kick off. Super excited to have all of you here. And yeah, as mentioned, we are really excited to give all of our pro users early access to the new Supabase integration that we've just built and are starting to deploy. And we wanted to use this session to give all of you an overview how this works, what you can do. And yeah, maybe Alex, if you want to share the agenda, and then I'll hand it over. So FYI, all the slides that are shown here are being built with GPT Engineer. And we have also, I think I mentioned in the kickoff email that you can use the Q&A function in Google Meets. But feel free to join actually a new Q&A that we just built with GPT Engineer as well to keep everything on brand and on the platform. And if that's it doesn't work in some way, we run into some issues, we can always go back to the Google Meets Q&A function. But yeah, as mentioned, super excited to have you. We'll start with a quick introduction here that I'm going through right now. And then we want to introduce you to Harry, who's been one of our most active users and who's been super successful with GPT Engineer, who's going to walk you through a few things that he has been building with GPT Engineer and showing you how he manages to commercialize it. Yeah, so we're very excited, Harry, for you to walk us through that. And then Alex will demo the integration and walk us through how this will work. We have a quick video that we'll try to show by sharing it through here with our kind of product Christian, walking through a quick setup for building an app with the Supabase integration. And then in the end, we'll talk a little bit about current limitations and then run a Q&A. So with that said, super excited to start the session. And Harry, let's hand over to you. And super excited to hear from you.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for the intro, Sebastian. I'm just going to share my screen as I've got a couple of slides to kind of help paint the picture of everything. So let's go into here. Awesome. Okay, cool. I've just got a couple of slides to kind of help go through a couple of things and kind of tell you guys my journey with GPT Engineer. So first of all, Harry Roper, consultant. I'm a full stack design engineer, and I kind of consult for companies mainly in the US, helping enterprise companies, so teams anywhere from 10 all the way up to 700 with problems that they're facing in regards to building internal tools and making their team run faster. Usually I'm joined by my co-founder Thomas, who kind of helps a bit more in regards to a startup and product that we're running. But needless to say, my journey kind of started with GPT Engineer after having spent a lot of time working with no-code tools. So Webflow and Coda were kind of my two solutions to be able to provide things for clients and be able to solve their problems kind of creatively, but without code, needless to say. I always felt like this, right? I can't code, I can't make my own projects. I wish coding was as easy as using Figma to drag and drop stuff around. And I even got so desperate at one point, I said to myself, I'm just going to use jQuery and PHP, which are the most basic languages out there, and try and hack something together. So I started with a lot of coding experiments. Some of them were using GPT Engineer, some of them weren't, but with this kind of goal of how can I try and build products and utilize this kind of new technology that we've got at the moment. It started with basic experiments in GPT Engineer about 7 months ago, when the tool was completely different to what you guys see now. So believe me when I say it's come very far in a very short amount of time. And it was very simple AI projects like building a landing page roaster, transcribing my audio notes, just trying to use some of these new features. You can see when I started using GPT Engineer, because my GitHub activity actually went up, and it started to become this thing that I was using daily. In fact, the founder of Lovable, Anton, told me around August period, I was saying that I love this so much, but I don't know how to sell it. And he said, why don't you just start selling it? And that was kind of like the 180 on me, which was like, oh shit, I probably should just try start selling it and see how that goes. And that's been really successful. Since then, I'm now running about 4 to 5 projects in GPT Engineer concurrently. And as mentioned before, working with my co-founder to actually make products that we're launching as a startup and a bit separate to doing B2B, more B2C. Needless to say, feeling very locked in with GPT Engineer. And it's enabled me to work with some really cool clients really quickly. We're now working with Do Wipes from the States to help them build their products. And I think this meme like generally helps give you guys the idea of the feeling most clients have when I show them GPT Engineer. They're amazed at the speed that you can build things with. And they're also very quick and happy to hand over budget and money to build out stuff. They immediately see the value of using it. And I think it's just worth mentioning that this tool really is kind of a game changer, because every dev that I've shown it to, they're able to build stuff in days now when it would have taken them a month. And they always say that. They're always like, wow, that was so quick. This would have taken me like, a lot longer than I thought it would be. Anyway, I'm going to jump into some quick demos, just of some stuff that we've built over the last couple of months now that I think are a great kind of demo of what's achievable in GPT Engineer. So first of all, it's really easy now for us to be able to build tools to organize our own internal projects and tasks. You can imagine there's no fee for ClickUp or anything like that. And I can build stuff that's very specific to what my company's doing, the meetings we have, the projects and tasks we have, even building out our own kind of dashboards for reporting. So we can very easily see what we're working on and what needs to be attacked, generating data reports, and then enabling my team to also leave stand-ups really easily as well. Internal tools are just one part of it, but also building stuff for clients. In this demo, we built out workspaces for a compliance company that we're working with in Texas. They weren't satisfied with the tools they were using to communicate with their clients. So we built them these custom workspaces that allow them to organize their tasks with their clients, files, etc. Or using Supabase, which is really, really easy and useful process to go through. Obviously, the benefits of using custom code when you're building this stuff for your clients is you can build them cool stuff like admin dashboards, so they can come in and edit this data really, really easily. A lot of people might say, well, GPT Engineer isn't that good at design. One of the experiments that I worked on quite early at the beginning was how can we build sort of like these really nicely designed landing pages or websites that would be able to go on websites like awards. I think that just by feeding and good prompting, you can get GPT Engineer to build out a lot of cool features that can make your front-end experience quite exciting. Simple hover effects for text, having a bendy line when you hover over it. So nice carousels to hover effects to just about anything. And I think with the right prompting and the right descriptions and telling you exactly what you want, you can very easily get to quite a high level of production value and quality. Finally, not just trying to sell my time, but trying to win back some time as well. And we've been able to successfully start doing that by building our own products as well. This is Renamify. We built this within about 4 weeks with GPT Engineer. And what it does is it allows you to upload a file of a folder of photos that you've taken on your camera, for example. And AI will scan the content, rename them, and then you can download that content again. You also have the ability to store that stuff on the back end. And needless to say, adding Stripe, user profiles, and just about everything else was a really simple process with GPT Engineer. So, everything from authorization to adding Stripe to everything else with GPT Engineer really is a 2-minute process rather than a 10-minute. I think that is it in regards to demos and everything else. So happy to answer any questions or move on based on what you guys have got for your presentation.
Super exciting. Thanks a lot for sharing, Harry. And maybe like one question already, and we'll like get into more in the Q&A in the end. But like, how has if you think about like the capabilities of GPT Engineer like a few months ago and like the evolution and now the Supabase integration, like how has that changed like what you can do and are doing with the tool? Yeah, that'd be super curious to hear.
Yeah, I think the main thing is like the level of entry to build these solutions. Beforehand, there was a lot of fiddling, a lot of like twiddling your thumbs, trying to Google how the hell do you connect this, how the hell do you connect that. Now with the Supabase integration, if you haven't seen it already, it's a button, connect your account, and you're off. And being able to have the front end builder now understand your databases, understand your tables, it makes the process a lot lot easier. 7 months ago, the app was pretty unusable commercially. I think that now, if you're not using it commercially, you might fall behind. Like these AI code generation things I hear, and I think a lot of people are like adamant that they're not real. But I think the benefit of using these tools and learning how to use them early on is really going to benefit yourselves and your companies as well.
Amazing. No, I mean that's exactly how we feel. So we're super excited to see users like you, I mean, really like buy into this and utilize it, get value. And yeah, I mean, like really probably having a strong competitive edge because of that. So maybe as a quick nugget, like we are like now users like Harry here, that we've been interacting with quite frequently. Like we are looking into like different ways of like showcasing like cool things that like our pro user community is doing. So like there's more to come on this one. But we're super excited to like follow everyone's journey and hear from you. Like when you also like use GPT Engineer for like cool projects, commercialize it, or like whatever you do with it. So we will be reaching out like with a few things that we want to do on this front. So very excited to hear from you. Maybe Alex, let me hand it over to you, and then during the Q&A, please everyone feel free to like also address questions to Harry, like on this.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more about the integration and practice, and I'm gonna start by just playing a YouTube video to you that was recorded by Christian, who's not here today. I don't know if you've seen it, but I think it's a great introduction. So let's just watch it together. I hope it works well with Google Meet. If it doesn't, we can share the link in the chat maybe, and you can watch it, but it should work. Let's see.
Hello, I'm going to do a quick demo on how you can use Supabase together with GPT Engineer to add full stack capabilities to your project. Stuff like login, persistence, backend functionality, etc. I'm going to kick it off by telling GPT Engineer to build a first version of an app that allows the user to insert a description and generate tweets based on that description. And I wanted to use AI. However, in the beginning, in this first iteration, I've told it to just mock the functionality. And I've also told it to make it possible for the user to be able to select how many tweets it wants to generate based on the description. Get the first version, I'm telling it to generate 3 tweets based on the user selection, and I'm getting 3 tweets as an output, which are mock tweets that are hard-coded into the code. Next up, I'm going to click on the Supabase integration button, and I'm going to connect this project to a Supabase project that I created before. This will take a couple seconds, and basically what this does, it makes your project Supabase enabled. It makes GPT Engineer aware of everything that you might have in the project and everything you will actually add to the project as we go. Once this is connected, I can already start prompting it for stuff that might require backend functionality, and it should already know exactly what to do. The first thing I'm going to ask for is for it to add basic authentication, and I want to make sure that users are redirected automatically to the homepage, the page we see right now after they log in successfully. This will take a couple seconds, and you will see that here it says that we have added login, but that you have to disable the email confirmation to just make it smoother to test. And I'm also going to go ahead and create a user account directly in the Supabase UI. You can also sign up as a user, but I think this is quite fast and easy. I'm going to go back to my app, and I'm going to introduce the email and password combination that I just created in Supabase. And you see I'm logged in, and I can again generate 3 mock tweets. Next up, I'm going to actually tell it to implement the full functionality and to actually generate tweets based on the description. I'm using AI, but I'm going to tell it not to persist it or save it in the database yet. And you will see that it goes ahead and create a Supabase function for me that it will deploy, and it will tell me that in order to connect to the OpenAI API, it will need to configure the secret, which I did. Once that's done, then I can introduce another description, in this case, the US election. And you will see that the tweets it generates now are actual AI generated tweets. We're no longer using the hard-coded tweets I had before. Next up, I want to actually make sure that the user can save specific tweets and that these are saved under their account so that they can collect tweets basically and use them to post things at a later stage. And what GPT Engineer does here, it creates a bunch of SQL that basically will create the saved tweets table and also create the right policies that basically define the permissions around the data. And I'm going to copy paste that in the script editor. I'm going to run it, and you'll see that this has created a tweets table. I'm going to then tell it that I did run the script, and then GPT Engineer will know that it can now connect the UI to this new table it has created. And once it's done, then I'm able to, again, introduce a prompt, the American democracy. I'm able to generate tweets. And what's different now is that, as you see, I have this little button that I can, as a user, click. And if everything here has worked, then I should have a page called Save Tweets, where I can revisit these tweets and maybe copy paste them into my Twitter when I'm ready to post. And just to show how this all ties together, if I then would go to my Save Tweets table in Supabase, you'll see that I'm actually storing it in the table, as expected. So this is basically it. We've created a small AI-powered app that allows you to log in as a user, to enter a description, and then generate a number of tweets based on that. And this is using auth, it's using edge functions, and it's using persistence, all delivered and made possible by Supabase. I hope you find this useful. I think this is super exciting. Please test it and let me know what you think. Have a good one.
All right. I hope the audio worked well for you, but I think this was a very, very good introduction by Christian here at Lovable on what you can do with GPT Engineer. And it really is just as simple as the video shows. So what I'm going to do now, I'm not going to do really much of a live demo because it's pretty boring to sit and wait for the AI to write code. So I'm just going to try to explain a little bit more how it works for those of you who don't really know Supabase maybe, and just show you a bit more some projects and how it looks like in the Supabase dashboard and GPT Engineer. All right, so we already have an app integration with Supabase, and we're now releasing the beta integration with Supabase. Supabase is what we call a backend as a service. So it's something similar to Firebase, for example. These services are basically a way for you to connect your front-end apps to a backend that's running somewhere else on the server side. If you know this client versus server thing, so the client is what's running on your browser to quickly go through this and not like make things overly complicated. And this is what GPT Engineer has been generating so far: client code, front-end code that you can run in your browser. And I know many of you have asked before for incorporating secrets, for example, in their applications, like API keys for using, I don't know, OpenAI or Stripe or things like that. And I think there's been some confusion quite often around whether you could do this or not. But the thing is that when you write front-end code, which is a website that somebody is going to literally download in their browser to execute it, you should not put any secrets in there, no matter where you place them in your code, because it's going to be visible and readable by users. So for those use cases, you didn't really have a way of doing it, except by asking users to essentially place their API keys in some app settings that they would set on their side, which I understand doesn't make too much sense for a lot of the applications you've been trying to build. And for these things, that's where you need backend. You need backend as well when you want to add proper authentication, like logging, if you want to be able to log in with email password or logging with Google, such things. Or when you simply want to save data at the user level, if you want to save user profiles, or like what Christian said, showed now with the tweets or any sort of use data. And this was not possible natively in GPT Engineer. So obviously, GPT Engineer can write code. So you could have asked it, can you try to integrate with Firebase or even Supabase for that matter, or other services, and could have tried to help you, but it was pretty cumbersome. And so what we've been wanting and what we want ultimately is to enable everyone to build apps and build products, right? Not build just toy prototypes. Prototypes are nice, but in the future, you don't need prototypes. You can just build the real thing directly. And this is where we're going with Supabase integration. So Supabase is, as I said, a backend as a service, and it provides different parts to it. And the main part is a database, obviously. So it's a database based on the Postgres database. If you know what it is, it's great. If you don't, it doesn't matter. But it's a way to store data. And provides authentication with it, which makes a lot of sense because most of the time when you want to save data in an app, it's going to be tied to users somehow. So you will want to have authentication, and then you want to have users, and you want to have data connected to users. And that's what Supabase database does. You have something called edge functions. So edge functions, I think it sounds a bit scarier, but it's basically the ability to run code that is not running in the browser and running it in a backend somewhere else. So you can do a bunch of things like what I mentioned before. If you want to call other APIs like OpenAI or any other AI infrastructure provider to use their models, you can store your secrets safely there and have these edge functions being called on the behalf of your users, essentially. Another major part of Supabase is storage. And storage is literally just if you want to store data, so users uploading files, for example, or I don't know, yeah, any sort of file management. And so this is what you can do on the Supabase side. They provide all these building blocks for building, I would say not 100% of the apps in the world, obviously not, but basically like all the things you can think of that are not like insanely big and are going to scale to maybe billions of users. You can be pretty much anything you think of with Supabase, come up with GPT Engineer. And what we're doing here is we're building this integration where from GPT Engineer you can try to control these blocks in Supabase and really keep the magic of GPT Engineer, which is that you just ask for something and then it does something, and you can basically either decide to understand what it did or you can decide to not do it. And even though I'm a programmer myself, I like to not use my brain very much, and I like when it just does the thing I asked it and I can move on. And with Supabase, that's what we're trying to achieve as well. So what can you build with this integration? Well, as I said, you can build anything. You can build literally anything you want. You can build applications around AI, which I think in this day and age, if you build a new type of application, you probably should think about how you're going to use AI within it, because it just opens so many new fields, so many new areas that would have felt kind of crazy before. Like Harry showed before, you can do things like that you don't even know really how it happens, but you know it's possible. And we have made extra sure that it works well with providers like OpenAI or Hugging Face, if you want to use any models out there for doing not only chatbots but image generations or tagging or all sort of cool things. Supabase provides embeddings as well if you want to do retrieval on your data, etc., etc. You can build any sort of e-commerce, SaaS, any productivity or social platforms. I think really the point here is to say that there's no excuse. You just need to get out there and you need to build stuff, and it's possible with GPT Engineer and Supabase. You might have some questions. We've seen a bunch of questions in our support and Discord around this. So who can use the integration and on what type of projects can I use it? So we support only TypeScript projects with the new beta integration. And it's a choice we made. And it's a choice we made for GPT Engineer in general to move to TypeScript from JavaScript. And there are a few reasons for that. I think the main reason is that we really want to emphasize on reliability. I know some of you have said it's fun to see the emojis. I see them. We want to move to TypeScript because of reliability, mostly. TypeScript provides more ways for the AI to fix issues because it's going to break faster. So it might give you the impression that there are more errors being generated when you use TypeScript. And that is true. But basically, when you see these errors, it's because it's trying to save you from an error that would have happened later if you had used JavaScript in your projects. And because of what I said before, that we are not in this for building prototypes, but we're in this for building applications that are going to work for real people and are going to scale. We think it's the right decision because it means that we're going to be able to build things that are able to get bigger, and it means you can have more edits in your projects. They can become larger and larger, and ultimately we don't want to have an upper limit on how many edits you can make on a project. You should be able to work on a project for years, and it should keep on working, be as reliable. So we think TypeScript is the way to go for that. And when we do integrate with a backend like Supabase, generally the complexity of the projects kind of, I would say, explodes a little bit, because you go from doing some things in your browser, which it can get quite complex, but I mean, at some point you've kind of seen a bit all the things you could do within the browser only. But when you start connecting to external data and databases with different tables, etc., it definitely becomes more. There are more rooms for failing, for doing weird things, shooting yourself in the foot. And with TypeScript, we think this is the way. So GPT Engineer has moved to TypeScript projects, and integration works with TypeScript projects, right? We had an alpha integration, and it's still there. That one has worked with JavaScript projects. And we're not making any changes to this one, but we're going to discontinue it at the end of the year. So what does that really mean in practice for you? It just means that you're not going to be able to refresh it from within your projects, but your code as it is, will just stay as it is. So it's gonna keep on working. It's not like it's gonna break. But it's just that GPT Engineer will not really do this syncing process that it could have done until now. And we really think this is the right decision for us, because the new integration works so much better. And as I said, it's going to be more reliable in the future. So who is this for? So right now it's only for subscribers, for pro users. We don't really intend it to be this way forever, but it's in early access now, and we're still in the phase of tweaking and improving things, because it could be improved a lot. So right now it's only for pro users, and I hope that makes sense, and it's going to come to everyone a bit later. Right? All right, so before we move on to Q&A, I'm just going to show you some more projects maybe that we've been building with GPT Engineer. Let me show you a few, and maybe I can show you this one, which has been my little internal toy project called Lotion. And it's a Notion clone built with GPT Engineer Supabase. And that's been one of the funniest projects to work on for me, because as a GPT Engineer user myself, I've often wanted to build things that are a bit more interesting, or a bit bigger scale than just front-end apps. And so I decided to take on building a clone of Notion with GPT Engineer and Supabase. And so it's just it is very much the same thing as a Notion, but just uglier. And you can write anything you want here, and you can type text, and you can also, for example, you can enhance the text with AI to write nice posts if you want to post on LinkedIn and fit with the crowd. This is done using Supabase with an edge function that calls OpenAI, and this is very easy to set up. Now with GPT Engineer, you can just say, hey, I want to use AI to do this, and it's just going to do it for you. And just to show you don't have to do text, you can also write an image about databases. What does that even mean? Let's see. Select the text and generate an image. And now we're going to call the DALL-E API on the OpenAI side. We've made sure this works very well when you ask for this in GPT Engineer, but we support also, you can ask it to call other models as well, and it's gonna find a way to build edge functions for calling those. So this is a bit slow, but I think it's gonna work at some point. And what was pretty cool with this project for me, I think, is really that it has been the project where I've been able to go further than ever before with GPT Engineer, where really you can feel, if you haven't used a product in a while, that you can keep on pushing and pushing, and it doesn't really get, I would say, confused the way it has done before. We've made a lot of work behind the scenes to make this happen, and it was necessary for Supabase. And building projects of this scale, which, like, it doesn't sound like too complicated, but like it has a lot of features. You can search for stuff. You can even, if you want, you can even pay for it. If you want to give me money, you can go to Stripe and even subscribe. No, this is a test account. You cannot subscribe. But it just was kind of fun to push a bit the boundaries and see that it keeps on working. And all of that was thanks to the Supabase integration. Okay, I'm gonna go through another fun project which I built. This one is a like art place. If you've played this thing before, game where you can place different pixels, and this is done in real time with other users, and you can chat and you can see the activity of others. But this has a twist. There are some AI users in the mix, so AI bots who are trying to draw some things with users. It doesn't work so well, the AI drawings, but just to show you that you can do pretty much literally anything you think of, and this is done within a few hours, and it doesn't even feel like work, because you're just giving instructions. I guess it feels like work if you are usually in meetings like me, but it's not real work. You're just talking. And if you want to multitask, you can have multiple GPT Engineer windows and work on multiple projects at the same time. All right, so enough with these projects. Now let's look at a real project that I've been working on today, and maybe we can look at this one. So if you're in the Q&A right now, I just have one monitor, so I can't really look at it. But maybe are trying this little webinar Q&A bot Q&A website that I just made, and I built it this afternoon. And this is a GPT Engineer project, and I can log in because there is basically a login for Lovable members to manage a bit things. And this was built really very, very quickly. I built this afternoon. And this is Supabase project. And I think what I want to show you is I want to show you how it looks like on the Supabase side. So I can log in. People can view these pages without being logged in. And we have a bunch of admin users, the ones who are basically from Lovable, who can look at questions, potentially delete them, or we can manage that a little bit. That was just what I tried to do quickly. And I can go on the Supabase side. So here, once you have integrated, you see this nice little menu. I can go to the dashboard, and in Supabase, here you have this table editor. Oh, wait, I'm not showing the right, sorry.
No, exactly.
The right tab. Let me make sure this is the correct one. Yeah. So you have all your chat messages in a table, you have user profiles, you have the different QA sessions, because you potentially could create many sessions. If you wanted to, we have this mechanism for keeping track of how many people are currently on the page, upvotes, all that stuff. What I like about this thing is that at no point I have thought about how to organize this data, and this is the least of my concerns. I've just asked GPT Engineer, this is what I want to build. I want people to be able to vote. I want to see how many people are currently on the page, and it just does the thing. And I'm not going to pretend it always works, but it's really, really capable at debugging these things and like overcoming problems. And I really don't have to design the backend the way you would maybe have had to do with the old integration to Supabase, where you would have to think about your tables. And I do think it's a very hard problem, to be honest, for someone trying to just build an app. It's pretty hard to know how to organize the data. I can continue giving you a quick tour. So one thing you're going to look at a lot if you end up using this integration with GPT Engineer is the authentication side. So this is where you manage your users in Supabase. And what is very nice with using this sort of mechanisms with Supabase is that you can basically in one click you can integrate tons of login sources. So you can have email, which is nice, but it's not really the most convenient for a lot of users. You can have Discord, Twitter, whatever, like Google, all these things that most people have. So they can log in very, very quickly in your app. And as far as Supabase is concerned, it's kind of the same thing. So if you get one working, you basically get all of them. And that's not something that you should really have to think too much about. It's very, very nice. This project is using heavily this concept of real time. So if you're not familiar with Supabase, maybe you're familiar with some backend concepts. Supabase has this super nice thing called real-time subscriptions, which means that you can build apps that will essentially just refresh very, very quickly when somebody adds some data and you want it to be added to your page. You don't have to refresh the page or anything like that, and you can enable it on your tables. And if you want to enable it, you can just ask GPT Engineer, and it's going to tell you how to do it. And it's basically copying and pasting a command down the Supabase side. And that is very, very, very nice. And so if you're trying the Supabase integration and you have not really heard about this feature or know about it, I can recommend you try it. Continuing the quick tour, we have edge functions in Supabase, which we're not using in this project. So edge functions are these backend functions that can run code. Maybe I can show you some edge function for another project if we have time, but basically you can see them here. Let me see if I can find another edge function. Yes, I can find another one here, for example. Yeah, so this is this other project with the grid that I created. And these edge functions are what's running the code in your backend. And in Supabase, you have this view where you can see the logs for them. So you can see when they run and what they're doing. You can track their logs. The logs are something we do not get in GPT Engineer at the moment. So if you do want to debug with Supabase edge functions, for example, if you have issues, you might have sometimes to copy and paste some logs in GPT Engineer to help us debug it. And we're working on making this nicer, but at the moment, that's one of the limitations. And then you can track your different metrics here, and you can create as well these storage buckets, which are just a way of storing data, images, for example, but it doesn't have to be, it can be any sort of data. And I think that's a good enough quick tour of Supabase. I'm just going to go back quickly to my project in GPT Engineer. And I guess I can just quickly show you the chat. So if you've not used the integration, when you ask GPT Engineer to do something, the database level. So for example, if you want to add users or if you want to create a new concept, GPT Engineer is going to tell you that you need to run some of these SQL commands here. So I can invite you to pay attention to the chat. I know some of us are just like chatting away and not really reading the answers. And with the Supabase integration, I think it's pretty valuable if you read these messages. The reason why we've done it this way so far is that we really want to make sure that these commands we run here, these migrations, are something that you actually pay attention to before you run them. And the reason is pretty simple, is that you have now data in a database, and you might not care about it, but you might also care about it. And the commands we run on this database could potentially change the way this data is structured. And we think it's pretty good if you learn to really review these things and understand what you're doing as much as possible. And it pretty often is possible to really quickly look at this and verify that it's going to do what you want. But we've tried to make it nice. So you have this nice workflow here where you can take this data here and you can copy it. And then from within GPT Engineer, we're going to link to you immediately to the SQL editor. So if you click on this button, you're going to end up in the Supabase editor, and you can paste the command and have it run there. We're working on making that flow even nicer, but that's really why so far this side is not automated. We could automate it, and maybe we will later. But that's something that we think is pretty good right now. But for other things, like for example, deploying edge functions and writing backend code, we are just going to run it, and it's just going to automatically deploy in Supabase. So you don't have to do anything. And what we really want to enable is we want you to stay in here, build your project, and keep on working and start. Basically, at some point, you should just stop thinking about backend and front, and you should just ask for things, right? This is the world we want to live in. And Supabase integration is obviously not completely there, but it really removes a ton of thinking for you building these applications. If you want login, you say, okay, add login. If you want to store some data, you say, okay, I want to store these things, and it's going to tell you how to do it. I think this is good enough of a tour, and maybe we should go for a bit of a Q&A now if you want.
Let's do that. And I think I've in the background collected the questions. I think we've gotten a lot of questions both on the Q&A tool that we have here and some in the Google Meets Q&A. The first one is around like the capabilities that GPT Engineer has with a Supabase integration. And like, what can it do? Does it create new tables, data fields inside Supabase? Can it like manage everything for us through prompts? And like, how exactly do I connect and create an edge function in Supabase?
Yeah, so when it comes to capabilities, GPT Engineer can control, can add authentication, it can create edge functions, it can deploy them automatically. It can give you commands to run on the SQL editor in Supabase. And for the reasons I just mentioned, we are not running them so far, but these commands are going to be able to create tables, populate data if needed. They are going to be able to create functions in the database and triggers, and also create storage buckets. So GPT Engineer can use pretty much all the functionalities of Supabase now, but we are not doing automatically the parts where we run SQL, because we think you should review them at this stage. That's pretty much the point right now. But we can leverage pretty much any feature of Supabase at the moment, and that's pretty cool.
Great. I hope this answers these three questions. I think then there's also like some users have noticed that like on some projects they can see the Supabase button, while on others in older projects they cannot. And some people realized already this is because like there's like, I mean, some people have the alpha Supabase integration and now there's a beta version. And a connected question, are new projects from now on already running with TypeScript?
Yes, so I think that we have enabled this maybe a couple of weeks back, but all projects are in TypeScript from the start right now, so you don't have to worry about this, whether you can use Supabase or not. So we have moved fully to TypeScript.
Exactly. And what about old projects that that like were created before TypeScript?
Yeah, so the old projects that are using JavaScript cannot use this new integration because it's using TypeScript. So the recommendation there is to, if you can, try to just start from scratch new projects in TypeScript. And for some big projects, I understand that it's just too much work and you might not want to do that. But I think that the product has made so much progress right now that rebuilding things is actually not necessarily that big. in GPT Engineer right now with TypeScript. But that's what we can say right now. As I explained before, we made this choice.
Yeah, and obviously fully understand that this is a bit frustrating. We're still looking at whether we can find another way. But yeah, I mean, like, at the moment, it's not possible so easily. So yeah, that's the workaround that we're looking at. There's one question around the security of Supabase data and like to what extent we have access.
So the connection with Supabase works with OAuth. So you log in with your own Supabase account, and we are just executing these commands on your behalf, the same way you would log in, for example, with GitHub. So it's the same thing. As the Supabase data is not in our possession in any way, it's in your own Supabase account in your organization. So that's not something we have anything to do with, basically.
And I think connected to this, there's one question, Harry, to you, like for the like plainly simple or not so simple landing page, and how you can store like all the data and the images that you use, how you did it and how you could do it with Supabase.
Yeah, so Supabase has S3 storage. It's backed by AWS, I think, their service. So you can just use their file bucket. They've got these things called buckets. GPT Engineer with the new integration will tell you when to create a bucket, and it'll also give you the command as well. So it's pretty easy in that regard. And then you just need to figure out the RLS policies. But again, GPT Engineer can enable that. So it's quite cool with our setup. Every user is given a folder, and with that folder, they can access their own files and upload their own files and edit their own files. But then they can't see other users' files. And yeah, it was pretty easy to set up. Storage, I would say, is probably one of the most powerful features, or one of the most powerful features of Supabase, but it's relatively quick to set up as well. And yeah, if anybody needs any help, just ping me on the Discord. I'll be in there if you need a hand.
I think Harry also has a community champion badge to make sure you can easily find him. Cool, but there's a follow-up question, like, I mean, or similar to this, and that's like, what's been the best method that you find for using GPT Engineer for real business production apps, and like how to like use them and handle them in terms of updating the code, testing in the dev environment, pushing to production, Git branches?
I don't know, maybe let Harry, yeah, go ahead, Harry.
Happy to take it. I think like from us and like working with clients at the moment, it's still the very standard process of like having a staging branch, having a production branch, and then just following a schedule. Those are the basics, I think, of running any project. I would say though that can you remind me at the beginning of the question again, Sebastian? There was quite a bit to it.
Yeah, of course. No, it was, I mean, how like would you use GPT Engineer like for, I mean, building business production apps with businesses?
That was it. Thank you. Yeah, so like we're really into tool making. That's something that we do quite a lot with this tool called Coda. So like basically thinking about like, okay, what's a problem that a team have? Like maybe a team wants to submit a load of sampling orders for a B2C company, and we want to enable their sales team to be able to easily do that with a form, and then allow their ops team to be able to have like a dashboard to overview that. Sounds like a really complicated app and a big complex process. And a lot of our clients are told by development agencies like, hey, that's going to cost you like $100,000 to build. Whereas like with GPT Engineer, it's a lot quicker and easier for us to build like an experience that solves a problem for a client and their team. Much cheaper, much faster. I mean, you can do it in like 2 weeks instead of 3 months. And everybody's happy. So like, I think that space is really exciting. Like the whole like building internal tools to help teams speed up. And you know, like a lot of teams use Notion nowadays and try and build their own little apps and solutions in there. But you have to really think like if you could give a team GPT Engineer and they have the ability to spin up an app that's going to solve a problem, like help them record meetings or something really quickly. You know, soon teams aren't going to be limited by like the tools they're using, but more like by their imagination, which I think is really exciting. It's like where I think you can see GPT Engineer going quite easily.
Super helpful. There's one question around, like, I mean, if there's a backend that is being spun up already, or like someone wanted to start with a backend, like how could GPT Engineer be used to build the front end on top of that existing backend? And like in that way, like, I mean, what is the best way to spin up that backend, for example, using Supabase?
Yeah, so I was gonna mention this around, like, I guess, best practices for building an application now that you have both front end and back end. And I guess there are different ways of making it work. I guess you can make it work through whichever way you choose. So you can come with your own backend, and then you can start a GPT engineer project where you might just start to say, oh, I'm building this app about this thing. And then when you connect to Supabase, we're going to retrieve the list of tables and everything you have on the Supabase side. So one thing that I think is not going to work well, like, to be reasonable, is that if you have a very large backend with lots of tables and lots of data, I don't think it's going to work well if you tell GPT engineer, hey, just do it, just integrate all the things, because you're basically going to ask it to build the entire app in one shot, and that's probably too much to ask for. So if you do have an existing backend, and especially if it has a lot of data, I think I can recommend to basically do it step by step and say, hey, we have this data now here in Supabase. Can you build this page? And now we're going to display this page. And basically try to divide the work in a way that GPT engineer is going to manage. So that's definitely the pattern I would recommend if you start from a backend that is already set up. You definitely can do it, and it's pretty fun. You can have a Supabase project, and you can build multiple versions of the front end for it, because you can connect multiple GPT engineer projects to Supabase. So that definitely is possible. But in the best of worlds, if you were to start a project from scratch, I would recommend that you quickly integrate Supabase, and by quickly, I mean literally after the first edit, if possible, and to start with things like authentication. If you're going to have users, if you're going to have this concept forever in your app, basically, I think it makes sense to quickly bring that in, so that your app is set up from the start for doing the right things, and making sure that you have this authentication controls and everything set up. It would be just easier and easier to just scale this and basically build it in an agile way, if you're familiar with these things, so that you can always keep a working version of your app as you go. It might maybe slow you down a tiny bit in the start, but it's definitely worth it for scaling. And this is probably a good practice for writing code in general, but I do think it does apply to GPT engineer. You can also just go full front end, do all the things in the connect data, but I suspect it would be easier to start from the start to connect the data. And as I said before, in the world we are going for, there is no prototyping anymore. You just do the thing, and I think it does make sense to think about learning to work this way.
Super. I think there's one question around something that probably a lot of us have encountered, and that is, like, when especially working on big projects, how do we prevent GPT engineer from editing anything else than exactly what we want to change? I don't know. Maybe we can foreshadow a little bit here.
Yeah. So this is something. Basically, that's the biggest problem with AI doing things with code in general. It's what we call, so internally we call that unwanted changes. When you're trying to make a change into your project that to you makes sense. It's like, okay, I want to change this thing. And then you look at your project and you realize, wait, where did this go? And you sometimes discover it quite far down the line, and this is very frustrating. And we all, I can tell you, I feel the same pain there. So we are working on this all the time. That's our top priority when it comes to how the AI performs, and we make lots of progress with that. We've added things also for you to spot these things more easily, like seeing the diffs. I don't know if you ever click on this edited X files box. If you open it, you can see the diff of your code, and sometimes you might see, oh, it did change this thing that I didn't want to, and you can tell it to not do that, and it's going to bring it back. But we are really fighting against this, and we've made huge progress. It's in a much better place than it was a couple of weeks back even. So we are still working on that. And when it comes to what you as a user can do against this, so I know some of you write stuff like, hey, don't touch this, don't touch that, and it might help a little bit. I think in general, one technique that works great is to try to ask GPT engineer to manage the size of your files, to essentially not let them get too big. The GPT engineer will try to not let that happen on its own. But if you can also, when you look at the code that it has written, if you do, tell it, hey, this is getting a bit big, can you separate it in different functionalities? So why am I saying you to do this? It's because it's just a lot less likely to touch things that it shouldn't be touching if files are more focused on one feature. So it's going to work on that feature and not basically have any collateral damage when doing an edit. And so this is a technique that works well, and that's something that we try to infuse into our pipeline so that the files are not too big. But it's obviously always trade-offs in this domain. And that's what I can recommend for users, to keep things basically well compartmentalized so that the AI understands the code even better.
There's one connected question around like that. Sometimes the the engineer responds with raw text or explanations rather than an edit, like when like the user doesn't want it to do that. Or I think like sometimes there's obviously this errors that occur, and I think there's concerns both around like how can I avoid this, but also what happens like when there is an error or an unwanted change with regards to credits that are being used.
So the first thing about the AI responding with text and not writing code is so it's something that I guess we can always tweak to make it do a code edit when you want it to, and talk to you when you don't want it to write code. And if you've used the product for a while, I think you've been through a time where it would always try to write code, no matter what you said. If you would just ask, hey, what is this thing? The GPT engineer would just start writing more code on this thing. And it was very, very frustrating because you just wanted to ask something. So we have really tried to change it so that it's more conversational and it doesn't necessarily need to edit code. And when it doesn't write code when you want it to, I can understand that it's an issue, but I think in general, we are also trying to find the right line in between editing code and not. And if you think it does it too much for you, you can definitely let us know, or you can prompt it in a way to say, to be more explicit. Okay, make this change. I want this to happen, and be clearer, right? And I think when it comes to errors, we are trying our best to reduce the number of errors, and that's the same. We've done this by a very, very big factor since we launched, like a lot. But it's definitely still something that can happen. And with TypeScript, as we said, we can have a bit more errors right now. But we think it's worth it for the projects. I can understand that the question was a bit about credits as well that are being deduced, right, when you make these edits. And we are, as I said, we're doing our best to make GPT Engineer better at doing the thing that you want. And it has gotten a lot better, and we are keeping on working on that.
Great. There's one question around data persistence, and I think like that's like what we've also run into occasionally during testing, where the app preview and the GPT Engineer builder needs to be refreshed to show data from Supabase. Do we know like why this happens when it happens? What can we do about it?
Right. So I'm not too sure I'm responding to the question. Maybe I misunderstood it, but I'm thinking that what you want maybe is what I mentioned before, the real-time subscription. Because these will basically make the data refresh automatically. And if you do not use that, basically that's how most web apps work. When you create your page or when you load the page the first time, it's going to query data from the backend and then just display it. So if new data is inserted, it's not necessarily going to just appear. It's not built by design in the browsers or anything like that. So it needs to be explicitly implemented. So you can ask GPT Engineer to implement that logic to refresh the data. But with Supabase, you can use real-time subscriptions, and then you basically will get this for free. And it will be a proper real-time, so it will appear really instantly. There's no delay to refresh or every 5 seconds or anything like that.
Perfect. Then there's a few questions on our plans, like how to further develop GPT Engineer. And like one thing is like whether we're planning to make backend integrations even easier. And I think here Replit is being mentioned. Like what's our plan there? Like what do we want to be able to control, like as for example with a Supabase integration through GPT Engineer that we can't do right now?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty obvious if you use the integration now. There's the flow I just showed about that you have to copy some commands and then go to Supabase and run them. And it is not that bad, but obviously you would like to tell the GPT Engineer, why don't you just run it? It feels a bit like we could just do it. And it's not that we haven't thought about it. It's coming. We're going to do that. And ultimately, we want you to stay in GPT Engineer and just build your app and not have to worry too much about how it works. Right now, we chose Supabase because it's this great UI for visualizing your backend. And I know a lot of users are not super familiar with too much of the software development lifecycle, and backend is a lot more scary, I would say, in general, because there is real data. There is you have to manage your users, so you kind of need a separate way of visualizing these things that we don't have in GPT Engineer right now. And we think that using Supabase is the right thing to do because it provides all these nice things. for you, and it's definitely something you can trust, you can use, and it's you don't have to worry about these things. So first, we want to make the integration with Supabase as tight as possible, and then, I mean, longer term, obviously, we just want you to build great apps. We don't want you to have to go to another service to create projects, right? We understand that it's not ideal. So in the long term, we really want to build apps where you just do things within GPT Engineer and it just works. Is how it should be. So that's I don't know if it's a bit vague, but I think it's that's the plan. Push Supabase to the limit, and then do the thing that makes it even nicer to build full-stack apps with GPT Engineer.
I think there's also a lot of questions like, what do people do like when they run into problems, and like, are we planning to like have any like videos or tutorials? I mean, I'm happy to take this quickly. So because we do indeed, right, we're looking at developing a lot of content to be like more exhaustive in like what you can build with GPT Engineer, and that includes, of course, like written documents, like maybe written tutorials in our docs, but also some more explanatory videos. So yeah, more to come on that for sure. But like, that's what we want to do to make sure that you can really utilize all the capabilities that the tool has and the additional capabilities that we're building over time. And there was one related question that I can't find right now. Yeah, but that is definitely something that we're planning to do over the coming weeks. Oh yeah, but the other thing that we always would like encourage you to do is to join our Discord community, because there's a lot of users on there that are actually like very active in like providing feedback. Because most likely, if you run into an issue, you're not the first one to run into this issue, and there's someone else who has solved it previously. So if you post, whatever barrier you run into on in our Discord community, there will most likely be people that are able to help you quite quickly. And otherwise, of course, you can always reach out to us as well. Great. There is like one additional technical question, whether like we could also integrate with SMTP servers for email and hosting platforms in the future.
Yeah, so you can do it via Supabase right now. That's going to be my standard answer. Supabase supports these integrations as well with edge functions. I think we should publish some content around these sort of typical examples. But right now in GPT Engineer, with Supabase, if you ask to send emails, you're going to be basically going to be guided towards a way of doing this with Supabase. And generally, anything you could do, any service out there that provides an API for doing whatever task, you should be able to use via GPT Engineer and Supabase edge functions. But we're definitely lacking documentation to showcase these things.
Sorry, I was on mute. And there's one question, like, when do pro users get upgraded from alpha to beta, or like leave beta of the Supabase integration?
Yeah, so you are already upgraded to beta, but as I said before, if you have JavaScript projects, they will not be working under the beta integration of Supabase, and it's only going to be for TypeScript projects. We talked about this for quite some time, for a long time before.
And then maybe one last question, because we're almost out of time, and that's like whether we offer or will offer team or company accounts, like with several users collaborating in a shared account.
Yes, stay tuned.
It's definitely like something that we're looking at and planning, and yeah, something will come. Fantastic. But I think we're out of time. So like, happy to wrap up here. Thanks a ton for joining, for engaging. Like, we have all your questions noted down, lots of things that we use to guide our progress here as well. Thanks a ton for Harry for joining. And yeah, as mentioned, you can find Harry on Discord. So if you have more questions to us or to Harry, please feel free to join Discord and reach out there. Super excited to see you. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.